Hello, this is Mike, NoStressMike.com, and I'm giving you my opinion on what has uh, gone from time. Like I said, I'm 71, from when I was younger, and how the police has evolved into what they're doing now. And I'm just giving you a few exceptions on what I think are some of the things that would make the general public a little leery about law enforcement. It's really kind of a uh, um, what do they call it? Not a good guy, bad guy, but anyway, we want the general public wants to trust law enforcement. We want to, but when law enforcement acts in such a way that they become a threat to the public, then we get kind of mixed feelings. We're not quite sure how we're supposed to do it. We like it when the police are used, but we don't like it when we're involved. I mean, it's okay. Let the neighbors call the police. Let all this happen to somebody else, but we don't want to get involved. And this is really what's kind of happening. Because I remember, now we used to, remember I raised my kids, man, if there's a problem, you call the police. If you have any kind of problem at all, you just call the police, and everything will be taken care of. And then I remember towards the end of that, when they weren't quite, I know, so when they were in high school, that's when I realized it's probably better you don't call the police. Don't get them involved. Whatever the problem is, don't get involved. And that's when I changed my attitude with you don't want to get into the system, because the system is not set up for the public. The system in time has changed, so they're protecting themselves. I mean, after all, the police are kind of like a strong arm for uh, your city or county or whatever, like that. I mean, they're the ones that do the intimidation for uh, officials, city officials, stuff. So, so everything is to protect them. I mean, after all, I mean, elected officials they don't have to take personal responsibility over their, what, anytime they make bad decisions, they're not held personally responsible for it. Okay, so, and now they want police or law enforcement to go do things. I mean, they make a law. Here, there's a law. You got to go do this, and they make them do things. And then now, when they do things, they look bad. Well, then now they made it so then, well, the police aren't personally responsible either. So no one that does the enforcing takes any responsibility. It's all the responsibility of me. And that's because there's a law that says that. See, that's why they got law enforcement. So they make a law about anything they want, and they're exempt from these laws. So their laws, the way their procedures and stuff like that, they can change them and stuff like that. So they're not involved in it. It's just me. So I mean, that's why you don't really want to get into the system. But anyway, I mean, and why do people get that feeling about, distrust? Well, I mean, we're to the point where, the police now will say, well, he was reaching for something, so I shot him. Well, you don't know what he was reaching for, but you went on and shot him. Back in my days, I mean, now, not only just reaching, but if you held a knife, they would go on and shoot you. I mean, you get there's what, 6, 8 cops, and they'll still shoot you. Okay, back in my days, you pull out a knife, they take the knife away from you. And then now they realize they know what kind of person you are. Then they throw you down, and then they do all this stuff. But like I say, I don't think the police uh, are even qualified or have the abilities to take a knife from someone. And there's been times I've taken guns from people, so, and so I don't know if they have the skills to be a policeman. That's why they're in law enforcement. You just do as you're told, and who tells them, and that's how the system works. And then there's Uh, oh, like what I say, they make a law. And the thing that's funny is they've got to the point they don't even make a law anymore. They'll make a regulation, and then the regulation they send the police in to make sure you do what you were instructed to do. I remember, and now you ought to remember all this because this has been with this pandemic stupid stuff going on. Okay, first they ask you to stay at home. And then eventually it starts turning into now they're telling you to stay at home. And then they start sending the police in to make sure why aren't you home? And then, okay, you don't have a mask. Why don't you have a mask? And, they're sending police into doing stuff like this. This isn't stuff that you want your police to be doing, but remember, they're not police. They're law enforcement. So all they're doing is just telling you what you need to do. And for some reason, people object to that. I mean, now we're getting to the point in our own personal life. I mean, it's bad enough you have to wear a seatbelt. Like, what's a seatbelt have to do with other people's lives? Well, now you have to do all this other kind of stuff because we tell you. That's the law. Well, it's not really the law. It's a regulation. It's not really a regulation. We just ask people to do it, and then we send the police over to make sure you do it. You understand what I'm saying? It's really kind of weird. They're thinking. I mean, they shut down businesses. Wow. How can you possibly shut down a business? Well, that's because it's not the law, and there's no regulations. And we're just telling you that you can't open. Okay, you see what I'm saying? I mean, they've ignored Constitution. They've ignored what's morally correct, and they call this an occupation. Law enforcement is an occupation. No, I mean you're just about the guy in the jailhouse. Making sure everybody stays in jail. I mean, that's what you're doing. You're not really working with the public. I mean, after all, you're even telling people they can't go to church. You think this is a fine way to run your law enforcement, is sending them out to make sure people don't do things, even things that are where they have religious freedoms to do? I mean, there's a lot of things that are not right that law enforcement has been doing. And they don't understand why people find some of their actions, objective. I mean, there's a reason for it. And now, personally, I think I'm really, one of my main concerns is wait just a minute. Yeah. Personally, it's, I did I had gotten the shooting in Topeka, and at that time I thought it was really odd that the policeman said, I said, boy, I wish you would have come along sooner, and then I wouldn't have had to shoot the guy. And then he said, well, I wouldn't have done that. I would have went over to the parking lot over there and waited. And I said, waited? Waited for what? And he said, well, I'd wait for the crime to get done, because maybe he's just going to take the money and leave, and then I can get him for armed robbery, or maybe he's going to shoot somebody, and then I can get him for a homicide and armed robbery, or maybe there's two of us inside there. He could have shot both of you, and then I could have gone for a double homicide. And I'm thinking, oh, okay. So that's all I'm saying. It's just things that, I know it makes sense to them. They got a reason for all that. That's why they got their policies that they do. But I'll tell you, ever since then, this was in 2007, and ever since then, it just kind of got me, because I know right now there is more human trafficking going on now than there ever has been through history. So when people start bitching, complaining, when we were slaves, right now, there's more slaves right now than what there's ever been. You know what I mean? So, you know what I mean? It's just, I mean, there's so many real crimes that are being done, and they're not going after them. They've got other things that they're working on. And to me, this is the kind of stuff that, for me personally, that I find objectable towards law enforcement. They don't let them do what they're supposed to do, policing, but they're supposed to do the laws. And it's not the laws, they've got different um, uh, policies and stuff that they work on, that they can only do this and they can only do that. And then, but if you don't do that, well, then, you know, then now you have a problem. So you have to do it. So now it has nothing to do with policing or taking care of the public. And I think it's so bad that I think the public realizes that now. And like I say, it's going to get worse because, like I say, I mentioned before, there was a time when the racial problems get so bad that the police would not intervene, because then it would look like they are taking a side and they don't want to get involved in racial problems. So that adds more to making them look bad. This Mike, no stress Mike.com.